Okay.
So, okay. Good evening. Welcome to our February 25th, the regular school board meeting for the Pullman School District. We'll first have our flag salute. Dean, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dean. We'll move on to our next item, which is the approval of the agenda for this evening. And Dr. Sturm, do we have any additions this
No,
evening?
just draw your attention that we did add a brief executive session.
Okay, so, and I understand that'll be about 15 minutes, so that'll be under item 10. That's good. Okay. Moving on then, we have our visitor section. If there are anyone in the group that would like.
We did approve it.
Oh.
I move that we approve the.
I'll second.
Thank you, thank you. I was looking at it as a friendly addition, but obviously, okay, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, against. Now we'll move on to our visitor section. If there's a visitor in the audience who would like to approach the school board this evening, we welcome you up to the podium, and we limit your presentation to about 3 minutes. And we'll listen, but we may not act on it this evening. So do we have any visitors that would like to address the school board this evening? Seeing none. We move into our reports and correspondence and programs. We start with our board reports. Susan, any report this
Nothing
evening?
to report tonight.
Okay. How about you, Dean?
Just that going over the expense vouchers, and when you start seeing those 7-digit payments being made to a construction company, it always catches my eye.
For
So
some
obviously work is being done on the school. Thank you.
That's what they call the heavy metal. Yes.
Evidently.
The high rise is going up. Okay. And Allison?
I'd like to encourage people to attend the PHS production of Little Women, and it is showing Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at 7 p.m. at Lincoln Middle School.
Have you been to it yet?
I have not.
Oh, okay. I just have one item this evening. This was an editorial that came out in the Tuesday, yesterday's Pullman Moscow Daily News, and it was entitled, "Teachers Must Be Part of Basic Education." So those of you that are following the McCleary decision, 3 years ago, the Washington State Supreme Court ruling required that the state fully fund public education, and legislatures are still debating what to do about that. This would include smaller classroom sizes, smaller class sizes, I should say, student transportation, classroom supplies. But the article goes on to say that it does not include raises for staff and teachers. So it's an excellent editorial, and I would encourage you all to read it. So I might circulate this with Shannon Self tomorrow, okay?
Thank you.
That's all I had. So we move on to our superintendent's report. Dr. Sturm.
Right, and just tagging on to Dean's comments about construction, it's moving forward. There's not a lot new to report. I watched a shipment, 2 truckloads of steel frames that will become the roof of the gymnasium come in today, and I think they placed one of them today. They're pouring hundreds of yards of concrete for footings and foundations. We should have another observation report that I'll circulate as soon as I get it. We got the minutes, but no photos of the progress. But a lot of work being done. We will continue to send you the change order update report as we receive it from our project manager. Nothing real significant. We had a required change order that came in. It's been probably 6 weeks ago. it had to do with some electrical code requirements, and initially it was at about $100,000 of added cost that came in from code review. Our project manager and the architects have been negotiating that, and it got it down to about $50,000, so that's good news. There were some pieces in there that were being required based on some assumptions, and we had some conversations with the city, and were able to knock that down a bit. So, other than that, anything, Dan, you can think of?
No.
We'll continue to give you written reports as they come into to us as well. Anything? No. Okay. That's all.
Thank you, Paul. We'll move on to our consent agenda. And in order to expedite the school board business for this evening, we will lump our minutes, our budget status report, our warrants, transfer requests, personnel reports, and professional personnel services reports together, unless the board would like to pull an item for later discussion. So what would be
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented this evening.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? All right, thank you. We have no action items, and for the audience, that means that items usually that we come forward as an action item would be discussed at the previous meeting, but we didn't have any discussion items last week or 2 weeks ago, so no action items today. We do have several discussion items that will be discussed this evening and then come forward as action items in 2 weeks. And so we first have our 2015-16 enrollment projections by Dan, our Executive Director of Support Services.
Thank you. We've been through this a few times with the board. I know that you're pretty familiar with our process to come up to a recommendation for enrollment for any future fiscal year. For the fiscal year 2015-16, we're bringing forward tonight a recommendation after the Finance Committee has met and discussed what our recommendation will be. As you know, enrollment is critical in the construction of a budget for a school district. 70% of our revenue comes from the state. Our enrollment drives revenue for staffing and for other materials and that we purchase and operate on through the year. If you have down at the bottom of the packet, we've got the first couple of sheets in the packet that we've got that deal with the enrollment forecast that we had for this fiscal year, which was 2,350. It's informational for the school board. The next sheet shows average FTE counts through December of 2014. Showed us 142 FTE over budget. That's changed today. We're around 110 at this particular point in time. If we go to page 51 of 75, I think it might be the next page. Yeah, this is a 5-year weighted statistical model that gives us an idea of what to expect for average enrollment for this fiscal year. And as I go through that process, down at the bottom, we've come up, it tells us that we should expect 2,475 for this fiscal year. Now we're changing it to about 2,470, 71, right in that particular area right now, which would indicate an excess of 125 FTE students over budget for this fiscal year. And so the next several pages are our cohort survival statistical models that we use, that we put in information of actual enrollment over a 5-year period that draws a mathematical conclusion and projects into fiscal years. There's many of them, as you can see, and so it's not anything that we need to dwell on tonight, but it is in your packet if you'd like to go through it. And it gives us projections based on different periods of this year, average June enrollment, October enrollment, March enrollment, and we project those values forward to get some idea of what the cohort survival method of analysis tells us. The page after that series of information is of interest, I think, to the school board. It shows an enrollment review from 2002 through 2014-15, almost to the actual for this fiscal year. And that gives you a lot of information about cohort averages and projections, budget, and actual out on the right column. But I think the part that's of interest is the climbing red part, which is actual enrollment in fiscal years past. If we look over to the right at 2014-15, the amount that we expect and anticipate is actually will exceed that graph. So for this fiscal year, we exceed the graph by, we believe, probably about 70 more students than the 2,400. So we're a strong, growing school district, and we'd like to react to that. And so as a finance committee, on the last page, we can go to that, is really the meat and potatoes of this presentation for enrollment information summary. So the October cohort projection, the averages of March, the year averages all combined, and June, now we do count June enrollment, as you remember, as well. The average of those projections turn out to be 2,527 FTE for the next fiscal year. So I always throw out the high and throw out the low. And when we do that, we're at 2,525, didn't change that much. Our average enrollment through January was 2,490. Through February, it's about 2,482. We did take a little bit of a drop in January, haven't completely recovered from that, and so that did shift that down to 2,482 for February. And our budget for this fiscal year was 2,350. Our September-October 5-year projection, as we talked about, indicates 2,475 for this year. We look at all the other considerations that we put together, which is everything from local economy to national labor markets to national growth and construction permits in the town of Pullman, our city, WSU growth, Schweitzer growth, agriculture, our enrollment, what has it been doing, and what is the legislature doing as well. So we take all those things into consideration when we put together enrollment projections. And what we really want to do as a committee this year is get closer to what we really believe next year will be. So we've done that. We're right on what I believe will be the average for this fiscal year. The Finance Committee brings to the board for recommendation to build the 15-16 fiscal year budget on 2,470 FTE. Now, we always have an opportunity in September, and we're alert to those first few days to see how enrollment is doing, to make any adjustments that we think is necessary for that fiscal year. And so 2,470 seems like a good number to go with for next fiscal year. The Finance Committee recommends that to the board for consideration. And I can answer any questions that you like. We would bring back that number at the next board meeting and ask for approval. We really have started the budget construction a month ago, but we have lots of things to do without the enrollment figure. So we would hope to approve that next board meeting.
Dan, this increased enrollment, is it biased toward one particular grade level, or junior high versus high school or elementary schools?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we're pretty fortunate that it's spread out over the grade levels. But Paul, do you want to speak to that?
Well, we're roughly hovering right around 200 at each grade through ninth grade. And we've seen as we hit that 200 mark a few years ago in kindergarten, and then it's been carrying through. That's been sustaining. So that's part of why our enrollment is growing, is because our enrollment has maintained, plus we add a few, that cohort moves up another year. So we're not really adding overall a lot of kids, but we maintain that to another cohort of students to another grade. And so if that happens again, if we get another class of 200 or more that moves to the high school, we'll have a freshman, sophomore grades that are at 400, which would project that we'll be, in a couple of years be at 800, which is 100 more than we are right now. We're at 700. So, whether that materializes is yet to be seen, but that's been the trend for about 8 years of moving up. We do have a little bit larger bubble at grades 1 and 2 that are about 230, 35 in those 2 grades. We have an extra teacher at each one of those grades this year. So that's in part why our new classrooms at Franklin are full. I mean, are being utilized. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And we built this year's budget at 2350. The previous year average was 2376, so we were 26 below what we averaged in the previous year. We just realized a big influx of students this year. We anticipate 125 beyond budget for this year. So we have to respond to that and adjust in a positive, reasonable, rational way, and we believe we're doing that.
Refresh my memory, when we have an illness move through like in January, does that skew the FTE counts or not?
No, because it's enrollment.
Okay.
So students remain enrolled. If a student is not in school for 20 days, we have to unenroll them, but that's essentially a month. And if they are ill and still enrolled, we then move into what is called a home and hospital service model, so we can keep them enrolled and serve them either at home if they have a chronic illness that keeps them out longer than that. So we don't necessarily have to enroll every student that might be absent 20 consecutive days, which is pretty rare.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty serious illness or injury that would keep someone out. Yeah. And so they remain enrolled, and we serve them with homework, and parents will bring work into the school, and we provide support at home, especially for a lengthy. But this is all based on enrollment, not attendance.
Okay.
So we're really only affected by students that leave the district during the year, and we're based on the average throughout the year. So whatever amount of time they were here would contribute to the average for the year.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Allison?
I got confused because I thought we were penalized by including June.
We are. We're only penalized if students leave the district. So what happens
okay.
is that a lot of families will leave out in May or so, but the
Okay.
legislature makes us count June now. Everybody across the state, and generally you have kids that leave the district there for the June period, which was my interpretation of their way to be able to bring a little bit of money back into Olympia by making us count June. And so we thought it would be a larger amount than it really turned out to be. We're not affected much by it, really.
Okay.
You have to really move a lot of kids out of the way towards the end of the year to affect a whole year average.
But it's in the
I think
neighborhood of 10 to
it's
16,000.
$16,000. Yeah.
$16,000
Mhm.
is what we.
Yeah, I misunderstood. I had thought attendance actually mattered. So.
No, it's
Okay.
because WSU's out in the first part of May, and so we have families that move away
Yeah,
in
sure.
May. That, graduate student, they finish and they're going on to a job, and they take their families, and so they disenroll their students, and that's how we lose. Yeah.
Got it.
Idaho is on average attendance, which is brutal when you get an illness that goes through,
Right.
or
Yeah.
a bunch of snow days and you keep school open anyway. Yeah, this seems like the way we do it in in Washington seems like a pretty fair way to do it.
So good questions. Any others tonight? What we will do then is bring this back. If you have any questions between now and the next board meeting, we'd be happy to work on those for you. And we'll bring them back for the next board meeting and ask for approval.
I just think one more thing, you know, we had some discussion back and forth around 2450 versus 2470. And I'll just say I argued for the 2470 because of the gap that we've had for so long between our budget and our actual. We haven't budgeted close to our, well, it's close, but I mean, we've been well under our projections for a number of years. 2470 is what we're staffed for that now. We're not going to riff anybody, and that's the main expenditure that we have is staffing. So my argument was, why don't we move that up to where at least to where we are right now, where we expect to end the school year this year, because we will be staffed for that anyway, and then we can make adjustments in the fall.
And I'm a little more conservative. But
Well, I mean, I think
That'd be damned.
in fairness, the other side of that is, you know, if we have 20 or 30 FTE not show up below that, then we'll have to make some,
sure.
you know, difficult choices. But
I personally think it's a good number to go with, and we can adjust to it, as Dr. Sturm's saying, quickly. So
He's not going to give you ulcers or anything.
no, I'm going to
Running
be
about it. Well, you know who to go to if it happens.
So Dan, this is not necessarily time sensitive.
No,
Okay.
we're rolling. We were working on budget today, and so this will just be helpful as we near March to get that.
Good.
To get that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Our second discussion item this evening is Policy 6000, Program Planning, Budget Preparation, Adoption, and Implementation by Dr. Sturm.
well, and I'm going to lean on Dan a bit here too, so chime in if I get something wrong. But just to give you some background, we've had a capital projects unrestricted fund balance at $300,000 for a number of years. We have for a long time we have not maintained that balance, in part because we have used it as a revolving account. We build it up to $300,000 and then we spend it, and that really I don't think was the original intent of that fund balance. That was really, the idea was to have that and maintain it in case we have issues that are unforeseen. We've really used it and spent it down for planned things. And so one of the concepts that the Finance Committee discussed was perhaps lowering that number a bit and really keeping it there as an emergency fund and not utilizing it except for unforeseen things, and then shifting other dollars into the general fund. There is a way, accounting changed, well, it's probably been 3 or 4 years ago, that allowed us to keep unrestricted or keep restricted fund balance in the general fund for a specific purpose. And so, for example, the board is talking about perhaps purchasing land that eventually we could build another school on if we need to, if enrollment continues to increase. So we could restrict a fund balance in the general fund for that purpose and hold it there. Transfer it to either capital projects when we make the purchase, or transfer it to debt service if we finance the purchase. So either way, it becomes a fund balance. So it'll increase our fund balance, be above 6%, but our unrestricted fund balance, we will still target at 6%. So, and then that way we can make expenditures out of the general fund. Accounting, when changes were made over the last few years in the accounting practices, it loosened up the kinds of things that you can, the capital, like large maintenance and repair projects you can do out of the general fund, where it used to be you couldn't do them out of the general fund. So it gives us a little more flexibility in planning, and really gives us an opportunity to make this, call it a rainy day fund or emergency fund for capital projects. Really makes it, allows us to put that there and begin to discipline ourselves not to spend that money unless an emergency actually occurs.
And is it designated then specifically for capital or projects so that it can't be just
Right, the
taken
200,000, once you put it in capital projects, it'd be really difficult to pull it out of there.
so
You'd have
people
to-
can't look at it and say, well, what do
Yeah,
you mean
no.
you've got the money?
Right.
But yeah, if it's restricted.
Right.
That's not included in our 6% fund balance that we.
Right.
Okay.
That $200,000 is currently in our board policy, is currently a $300,000 number, if I can find it here. I'm trying to make this a little bit bigger.
I think it's down below there.
Under
it's down
3.
below. So it's 300 now.
Yeah.
We're proposing, I mean, we could leave it at 300,000, but we're proposing to go to a more moderate number of $200,000 and really discipline ourselves to leave it there as an emergency fund, which is what was originally intended. I was here when we did this policy a number of years ago, and we really haven't maintained it. We've dipped into it for projects, and it's been more of a revolving fund and not serving the purpose that we intended it to serve.
Well, I think key to it, as Dr. Sturm said, is the fact that they finally changed the definition of capital expenditures and general fund expenditures. Because it used to be that to almost do anything capital-wise, we had to move money over to capital projects fund, and then we had to spend out of there. But they've really loosened that up. You can do boilers now in the general fund. You can pour whole, it used to be whole things had to be out of the capital, a whole wall, a whole. But now they've changed that, so we have a lot more latitude now, and it really opened up like it should be, so that we can take care of those things as a definition of maintenance in a district.
Wow, that is a big difference from what it was.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then there are some minor edits in here. Shannon, those were in the WASDA policy, the sample policy. They made some clarification. 1.0, that's what we do. I mean, by law, it just wasn't in our policy. Now it is. And then you can see the language here. This is just what we're talking about, and I described in 2.3 there. I'm not sure why they changed the shells to will. Does it change? I'm not sure that changes the meaning any. And then there's some references that were added to the policy. So, questions, comments? Good. Get carried away here.
Okay. Any other discussion for Dr. Stern or Dan? No? Okay. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Paul. Our last discussion item this evening is construction change orders. We have talked about these in different venues before, but now we're looking at deleting and looking at revisions to a policy, deleting policy 6957 and approving revisions to 6950. So, Dr. Sturm.
Thank you. Yeah, last board meeting, we discussed changes to policy 6957, and then out of that discussion, I followed up with some more research and was able to find a WASDA sample policy, and they had eliminated 6957 and put the language about change orders into policy 6950. So with that, we changed our recommendation from last time to change the policies about change orders. It was a standalone policy about change orders, and just folded into the policy as WASDA recommends. And so that would be deleting this policy, which we had discussed was restrictive, especially in the project we're in right now. We have change orders weekly, and you know, some of them are $500 and some of them are several thousands of dollars. And if we have to have a special meeting, as this indicates, of the school board each time a change order comes up, it's going to delay the project. And so the recommended language, you can see here, the board will approve authorized change orders which arise during construction in order to facilitate to timely progress during construction. The board may grant the superintendent authority to authorize change orders if additional cost to the district does not exceed the approved contingency for the project or extend beyond its original scope. And I think the extend beyond the original scope has to do with, you've approved the design, the schematic and design development phases. And so if we're going to make significant changes to those, to that scope, we would come to the board for approval. I think we talked about, at a work session, we talked about a proposed change to the ceiling structure in the library that doesn't really change the scope of the project, but it changes the design that you approved. So we brought that back for consideration, and we don't have the numbers from the construction team yet, so we can't really act on that now because we don't know what if anything we would save by changing it.
Questions for Dr. Sturm on the change orders, construction? And like Dr. Sturm said, this has kind of really just become very, very apparent because of the ongoing renovation here at the high school.
And the board, just to remind, I think, Susan, you were not here last time, and
Right.
just to remind you that the board did take action to give us the authority to move ahead on change orders at the last board meeting.
Yeah, I saw in the minutes. I actually read
Perfect.
the minutes
Perfect.
and noticed that. Frightening.
Okay.
So we're in a sense practicing this, but we in our existing policy we had latitude for the board to do that as well.
So would this be something that would be good to be an action item tonight or not?
I think we're good. I think we're okay to leave it.
Perfect.
I think by acting on the authorization last meeting,
Yeah.
gives us the flexibility to
And we're giving you at least monthly reports on, written reports on change orders, so you can see that activity and ask questions if you need to. And if there's anything big that, you know, that changes like the scope or design of the building, which we don't anticipate, but we bring it to the board.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sturm. We have a few informational items that you may look over, and then we move in now to our executive session, but we'll have a brief recess here so we can clear the room. So,
Yeah, we can, I suspect there may be some questions for.
sure.
From
And we
the-
can
from
we
the
can
audience,
allow
so we can
10,
wait for.
15 minutes, so whatever the, why don't we just take a 10-minute recess? Do we have a motion to,
Oh, I will so move.
okay?
Second?
A second? Okay, moved and second that we move into executive session, but we'd have a 15 or 10-minute recess, so we can questions from the audience, with any of the board members or Dr. Sturm. Okay.
Tiffany, I saw you taking a picture.